Welcome to Parenting in the Age of Coronavirus, a new podcast from the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Melbourne. I'm Professor Julie Green from Raising Children Network and MCRI, or Murdoch Children's Research Institute. In this podcast series, I'll be joined by experts in child health, and we're going to talk about supporting children and parents, unravel the challenges parents are facing, and explore how our children can continue to learn and thrive and develop. In this first episode, we'll focus on parents and carers of children from birth to age 5. And today I'm joined by paediatrician Professor Sharon Goldfeld, who leads population health at MCRI and is director of the Centre for Community Child Health at the Royal Children's Hospital. Also with me is paediatrician Professor Frank Oberklaid, a director of Raising Children Network and an internationally recognised child health expert and MCRI researcher. Welcome, Sharon and Frank. Before starting, the MCRI acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Firstly, can I start by acknowledging that there is a lot going on for parents at the moment. They're managing the care of their children, they're being asked to support their kids learning in new ways, and they're likely to be doing that while simultaneously doing paid work from home, perhaps dealing with employment and financial pressures, and without backup from neighbours and extended family members that they might normally have. Sharon, can you lead us off? What are your tips for parents as they try to balance nurturing their children amidst these big changes to family life?
Thanks, Julie. And I just so agree with you. There's so much going on for parents. Today's the 20th of April. It's been about 5 weeks since many of the restrictions for parents and for the rest of the community has kicked in. For many of us, it feels like about 5 months or maybe even 5 years. And so there's a lot of white noise out there, a lot of anxiety just about what's going to happen next. And as you know, that all those changes happen so quickly. So the first thing is for parents and carers is to say you're actually human beings. And so not being able to move forward when all that white noise is around, perhaps not sleeping all that well yourself, and thinking about all the anxiety there is out there, it's really normal to wonder how on earth do you take the next step? How on earth do you manage perhaps doing your work, looking after your children, looking after yourself, looking after your home, looking after your partner? For some people, it probably just feels like an enormous task every day. So I think the first thing is to just be kind to ourselves and to acknowledge that it is a very, very tough time for everyone. The flip side of that, of course, is that there's the extraordinary both opportunity and challenge of having children around you all day. So for many parents and carers, their children might normally be at childcare. Some of the older ones might already be at kindergarten or preschool. Some of them might have other carers that normally look after the children. And then suddenly the children are with you all day, every day. And that's a really tough gig for some parents. So that kindness, that ability to be able to say, okay, what are we going to achieve today, is about lowering the bar and basically say, what can I do with my kids? That's really just spending time with them. Because it turns out for children's brains to develop, that relationship with their parents and their carers is really at the very heart of child development. We talk about this tennis game, this kind of toing and froing and the sorts of things that develop children's brains. And it's that relationship, that toing and froing, that's really important. And that might be everything from just chatting while you're doing things right through to doing very simple things like taking a walk around the garden and having a chat. It might be about talking to your baby or your toddler or your preschooler about the sorts of things you might be doing that day, which might be as urbane as just doing the dishes, making some food, going for a walk outside. All those very simple exchanges are so rich, and we shouldn't underestimate the importance of them for parents, even though we're all feeling so much of this white noise at the moment. And of course, it's managing that anxiety within ourselves that's so challenging. And then managing that anxiety in our children as well. The older children who are developing language are probably asking questions because it's almost impossible not to understand what's going on for families. And it's being very clear about just reassuring children that, in fact, what's going on in the world around them, that you will protect them, that you will look after them, and for life to be as scheduled and as normal as is humanly possible.
Oh, thanks, Sharon. There's so much reassurance in what you say, and we might well come back to some of those points a little bit later. A common question I'm hearing from parents is, how do children process and respond to these changes, and what can parents do to help their kids to adjust well? Frank, what do we know about children's ability to adapt and manage change in routine and in their environment and so on, and what's helpful?
Thanks, Julie. I think the first thing to say is that most young kids are extraordinarily resilient. So parents get anxious that they're not doing what they should or doing something that they shouldn't, etc. So the first thing is to reassure parents. The kids bounce back from all of these things. Most kids do adapt quite quickly to changes in routine. And as Sharon said, the key thing is their relationship with their parents, that they pick up on parent emotion. So if parents are anxious or flustered or stressed, the young kids will pick that up as well. So children do adapt, they do get back into routines, they don't mind changes, and what's consistent and what's important is the presence of that stable relationship. Their relationship with parents is the anchor that young children keep on coming back to. So if there are blips in their routine, if they get a little stressed at times, the first thing they'll always do is look at their parents, come back to the parents, and that sort of provides the anchor that's just so important. So I think that's a really important message, that parents think that they should be in some other way. They should continue to parent intuitively as they always have. They'll know what the right thing is for their kids. They'll know when the kids are getting a bit anxious. They'll know when they need to pick their kids up and give them a cuddle or sit down and listen to some music or go for a walk. They know that intuitively. And just reinforce what Sharon has said, that parents are like air traffic controllers. They've got to manage the household, juggle work, juggle their kids, etc., etc. The other thing is that we find that some parents compare themselves with other parents. There's these media reports of parents that use the downtime to do things creatively, to cook and to create musical things and all these wonderfully creative things. And some parents might look at that and say, I'm just really swamped. If I was really okay, I would be able to use my time creatively and cook fantastic cakes and learn a musical instrument, etc. So the important thing is just trust your instincts. Don't compare yourself with others. And remember, kids are extraordinarily resilient.
Okay, thanks, Frank. That's fantastic to hear that. I know Raising Children Network has a very active community on Facebook, and at the best of times there's always lots of sharing of resources, and we're definitely seeing more activity there than over these last few weeks than usual. But there's also a lot of questions that we're being asked about how to talk to children about coronavirus in a way that really helps them understand, but prevents them from worrying too much. So perhaps Sharon, can I go to you? Do you have any guidance there on how to strike that balance of giving kids facts about coronavirus, but not overly alerting them or being the cause of anxiety in their thinking and daily life?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And, I just want to reflect back on Frank's previous comments as well about the kind of parenting competition that goes out there on social media, because it's so much pressure, isn't it? I mean, I think there's pressure on parents every day anyway, on particularly when you've got celebrities doing these amazing things. And I just can't reinforce enough this idea of really parents just trusting their own instincts, as Frank says. It's so important important. And just knowing the very basic things that they can do with their kids. It doesn't have to be making perfect cookies with perfect icing or, making beautiful creative things. That's all fantastic. But just actually the basics of just hanging out with your kid, doing basic things together, whether that's in the garden or in the kitchen. All of those things are so fundamental. And that's when you can have these incidental conversations about what's going on around you, remembering that we're talking about pretty little kids here, some of whom are babies. So, of course, they're protected a little bit by all of this. But as children start to get verbal, so 2, 3, 4, and their levels of sophistication of knowing what's going on, then you can start to have those kind of different conversations with children about what's going on. There is some things you can do as a parent that can help you with that. And the first is to make sure that you're protecting your kids in terms of what they're seeing. It's pretty hard because a lot of the virus stuff out there is pretty pervasive. It's in the news, it's on social media. People are talking about it all the time, right? You'll be on the phone to friends or on Zoom or on Facebook, on house party, having all sorts of conversations. And it is important to make sure that you think about those conversations around young children who are only hearing snippets. And so just being mindful of the conversations and the exposures young children are having the TV on, for example, in the background with news, etc. Those sorts of things are the environments that as parents we can actually control. And it's really important that we think about that because young children can't really make sense of it all. And there's a lot of very serious faces going on in the news and in the media. So really making sure that kids aren't seeing too much of that, I think, is the first thing we can do. The second is it's impossible for the older children in particular not to have some sort of conversation about what's going on because they're wondering, why am I not going to school? Why am I not going to preschool? Why am I not seeing my friends? Why am I not seeing my grandparents, for example? Now, aside from the fact that there's all sorts of different ways now you can see your friends and grandparents, they're definitely going to ask those questions. And there's some very nice material available on the web, and I know Raising Children Network has got some very nice things about how to do this. But some of the really nice things has been around sort of making the analogy of a cold. Like kids often have a cold, they have a runny nose or a bit of a sniffle or a bit of a cough. And so they understand what a virus is from that point of view. And for many parents, this is the sort of advice we've been giving them, which is to talk to them about there's this very special virus. You know what that's like. Sometimes you have a cold. It's how important it is to wash our hands because we don't want to spread the virus like we would normally do. And really, this is that sort of a virus, and we're keeping safe so we don't spread the virus around to everybody because we don't want our grandparents to get the cold and we don't want our friends to get the cold, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. So for most children, they'll kind of get that because most kids have had a cold of some sort. And I think together with sort of normalising it in something they can understand and trying to keep them away from a lot of the media, those are the sorts of things that allow parents to have a conversation without all of that external white noise trying to enter into the conversation too much.
Thanks, Sharon. They're really, really helpful points. And despite all those best efforts, some parents are starting to notice some changes in their children's responses and behaviour, picking up on signs of anxiety, perhaps being affected by some of the changes, not seeing some of those, their friends and grandparents and so on. Frank, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts? Would it be fair to say that some children might be more anxious or are more affected than others? And, during the coronavirus period, and if this is the case, why do some children experience more anxiety than others?
Yeah, that's a good question, Julie. I think all parents can see differences between their children. Some children are very easy, some are more challenging. Some children are born with an easy temperament. These are infants and toddlers and young children that are relatively easy to parent because they're flexible, they're adaptable, they adapt very quickly to changes in routines, they're no fuss, etc. And thankfully, that's the majority of children. But there certainly are children that have a more difficult temperament or a slow to warm up temperament. And these are kids that don't like changes and routines. They take a long time to warm up to anything different. They approach new situations with a fairly intense reaction, no. They get irritable. Parents know when they're not happy. And these are more challenging to parent. And these are kids that need a bit more space. They need a bit more understanding. They need more time to get used to things. So I think all of us can relate to the fact that we do like routines, and for some of us we adapt easily, and for others it takes longer, and kids are exactly the same. But you're right, some children do exhibit symptoms of anxiety. They do become anxious. Parents can see that. They're more clingy. They might be more irritable. They may not be hungry. They may have sleep problems. Some children regress. For example, if they're being toilet trained, they may start to wet their bed or wet their pants again. And these are all signs of anxiety. For most kids, these are transient. It does represent a change in routine. And again, I just repeat what we said before and what Sharon said, that parents are the anchor. If parents are calm and parents are reassuring, and parents understand that some kids do need more cuddles, and if they're clingy, pick them up, understand why they've regressed. Most children will get through this. They'll emerge fine at the other side. Where parents are concerned about anxiety, remember that they can get support. Sharon mentioned raising children. That's got a lot of information about how to handle these sorts of challenges. But parents can also contact their GP or their maternal and child health nurse or their paediatrician if they need more advice and more support. So yes, there are differences in the way that young children react to these changes in routines, the sort of stress that we're seeing around. But most children will just emerge without any concerns through to the other side.
Thanks. That's a great reminder that GPs and child and family health nurses or maternal and child health nurses, those services are still on deck. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and I just probably worth saying that a lot of them are able to do telehealth or televideo. And so if parents are concerned about going places, that there are other ways of getting those supports. So that's really, really important. But just reinforcing Frank's comment about the importance of just reassuring both parents and children about getting through to the other side, and accepting that there will be a level of anxiety in kids that's just okay.
Okay,
and I think parents can re-establish new routines. Simply because their old routines have been disrupted doesn't mean that they can't establish new ones. And things like reading to your child every day, going for a walk, going outside, using children's media. There are new routines that kids can get used to quite quickly. So it's not as if you've lost your old routines and there's a blank slate.
Yeah, I think that there's lots in what you're saying there. So even though we're seeing and hearing lots of commentary at present about children learning from home, we know, I think you're both saying that we know homes have always been places where lots of learning goes on as children grow and develop. And you've both made some really good points around, flexibility to the routine.
And Julie, for young kids, of course, all their learning's through play anyway.
Yeah,
that's how they're learning. So it's not for young children. It's not an issue of sitting down and learning words, etc. Any sort of formal way. It's young children learn through play, and so I think this idea that Frank's put forward, this idea of creating schedules around play, is just so vital anyway. And parents and carers are just in this great position of just working out, well, what does that mean for us today? It's going to be a bit different. It's not going to be as structured. It's going to be a little bit tricky at times, but hey, that play stuff's still really important, and we can lower the bar on these expectations that perhaps both ourselves and others are putting on us to just get through the day.
Great. And I'm reminded that one of young children's favourite topics is themselves. So, making up stories, putting your child in the story, you can't go wrong if you go down that path, I think. As we said earlier, there's a lot going on for parents, and often without the usual levels of support. And given that we're down the path several weeks into lockdown, what are your thoughts on how parents can realistically and sort of genuinely manage their own well-being at this time?
I think that it's really important, Jill. I saw something in the newspaper over the weekend. Keep your own mask first. When you get on a plane and the announcement comes over, if there's an emergency, masks will fall down. Make sure you fit your own mask first and then attend to your child. I think that's an important message, that looking after your own health is so important. The sort of things that Sharon has said before and I've said before about lowering expectations of yourself. Don't try and be a perfect parent. Just do the best you can. And just your presence, a parent's presence will often just be enough. I said before that parents are like an anchor. The child will keep on coming back to a parent for reassurance, to show them what they've drawn, to play, and so on. And something else I read over the weekend was parents self-medicating with humour, with meditation, with music. There are so many things that we can all do as adults to calm ourselves. Meditation is good. Music is good, depending on the mood. It can be calming music. And one of the good things that parents can do for young children that are too young to meditate is just have quiet time in the evening or any time during the day where they put on gentle music, or it can be a children's music, or when the kids go to bed, if parents need to let off steam, they put on loud music and dance crazily to it. All the things that parents have learned to do in the course of parenting become even more important.
Anything to add?
Yeah, just there's some tweets going around over the weekend with the schools sort of starting from home. And I know that's the older age group, but of course there'd be many parents out there who've got a school-age child and a toddler at the same time. And the person said, I'm just trying to work out how to do this. I've got to work 8 hours a day, look after my school-age kids 6 hours a day, work out how to entertain my toddler and make food and look after the house and look after myself. If anyone says yoga or meditation, start running. And I just love that, because it was just this acknowledgement that, that's obviously more hours that anybody has in the day to be able to do all of those things really well. And I know a lot of parents are still trying to work, and so it's being able to talk to their work organisations or their managers about how to be flexible. If there's a partner in the home, how do you do things in different ways, maybe working in the evenings rather than during the day, all sorts of interesting things, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Sorts of things that just become really practical. But as Frank says, finding some ways to look after yourself, even if it's going for a regular walk, just really simple things, even if it's not anything fantastic like yoga or meditation that's real structured, just going for a walk, having a chat to people on the phone, on House Party, on Zoom, or any of those sorts of things, reaching out to other people. It can be internationally people now, it seems like we're a global world. So those sort of things where it gives you as a parent a bit more strength to face the next bit of the day with these incredible expectations of us trying to do with all this white noise is so important. I really like Frank's analogy of, put your own mask on first. I think it doesn't have to be sort of big structured things, but just find some ways, some reflection time and go, what do I need to get through the next hour or the next 2 hours or the next 4 hours, rather than what do I need to get through the next week, which is probably almost overwhelming for any of us, because at the heart of all of this, we are actually human beings.
Remember, there's no rule book for this. Nobody's written the rule book of how to cope at this time. Parents have to write their own rule book that suits them, not that suits somebody else, not that they've seen on social media of somebody that does it their way, although they can get some useful tips from that. And there are supports around. Reach out to your friends, as Sharon has said, go to authoritative websites like Raising Children, and don't be afraid if you're stressed, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, ask for help, either from your partner, make a phone call, do a Zoom conference, anything that it takes to get through to the other side. And I like Sharon's idea of using humour. Humour is a great way of relieving stress.
And parents do know themselves and their kids and their family best of all. So there's a lot in what you say about, having a laugh together and staying connected. Look, thanks so much, Sharon and Frank. I think this has been a really helpful discussion. I'd also like to thank Medibank for their support in making this podcast series possible. We're going to be back soon with an episode talking about coronavirus and parenting of primary school aged children. If you've got some tips or tricks to share or a question for our guests, let us know at podcasts@mcri.edu.au. And if you'd like further information on any of the issues we've talked about today, visit raisingchildren.net.au. Thanks for taking the time to listening to our first episode. Please share it with friends and family and give us a rating. We'll be back soon to explore more about parenting in the age of coronavirus. Thanks for joining us.